Good morning. It's Monday.
After gaining an extra hour of sleep, do you not
That's
feel
right.
refreshed?
We gained an extra hour and I went to bed at 9 o'clock last night. So
Same. That's great.
I feel a lot better today after traveling over the weekend. Because just traveling just takes it out of you sometimes.
Sometimes it does.
Yes.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But it was also great. Got to see the ocean, see some old friends. Seminar was great. So that's what I want to talk about today is part of what we worked through as part of the seminar. It was a chiropractic seminar, but oftentimes they'll bring all kinds of different guest speakers in and different topics. And so one of the speakers, he's evidently pretty famous. I had not known him before the weekend, but David Meltzer.
Oh.
You heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know his story. He touched a little bit on it, but evidently he lost everything. He came back.
Wow.
And now he calls himself a builder of communities, which I thought was really fun and unique and cool. Because that's a lot of what we're focused on as we wrap up this year and head into next year is really focused on building our community, building them up, finding the right people that want to be part of our community, and what that looks like and what that means for them as well. But one of the big things that they talked on this weekend was finding your superpower. And that's been a theme throughout the office for a while this year was, finding the superpower as an office, but also collectively as our team, right? Each team has a superpower and how we show up and bring that to the office so that our people can have an amazing experience when they come here. And so that was a question that they posed, and so then everyone was posting it all over online, like, hey, what does everyone think my superpower is? Because it's often very hard to gauge what it is for yourself.
Right, or how other people might see you, or what kind of message do we send or put out there, right? We're very unconscious, I think, of a lot of those things.
Absolutely. And I've done this prior to this weekend, sent out an email or a text to a group of people and like, hey, what do you think, like what's some superpowers of mine? Or maybe I didn't quite word it superpower, but strengths, yeah, things that you take, typically it's things that you take for granted because it comes so naturally to you that other people think is really amazing and you don't even know it. So that's going to be what we're talking about today is finding your superpower. There's a list of 10 questions that I found through the weekend, but also online that can be a good gauge and a good starting point for you to ask yourself, for you to ask other people. And I don't think this is, maybe it is, maybe some people know right away, hey, this is my superpower. But if you're anything like me and you overthink things or this is newer concepts, right? Then, here's some questions to spark some thought and take a moment to, sit down and journal or, again, reach out to and have a conversation. In fact, probably the best piece of advice that I got on finding this, or they were also talking about like personal brand in relation to this, is sit down with somebody and tell them your story and ask them, hey, what parts of this really stuck out? What was interesting and unique? Because when it's our story, we don't think anything is really that interesting or unique. However, other people typically find things very fascinating and interesting. And oftentimes that's your superpower. So, and everybody has a story, everybody has a comeback story or a come up story, right? You were the only one to go to college. You were you didn't have the greatest childhood, and now you're an amazing parent, right? Like, that's an amazing story that a lot of people, I think, take for granted, how amazing that really is, and that's a superpower. So I think that was my biggest takeaway, is like really sitting down and, again, working through your story with somebody else and seeing what resonates, and not that you should also gauge your story based on what everyone else thinks, right? But if you have somebody who you trust, and oftentimes you'll go through your story and you'll have known somebody for years and they have no idea. But a lot of other things might make sense. Right?
Yes.
So question number 1 is, what comes naturally to you? I think, again, this is something that because it comes naturally, you kind of just take it for granted. Right? Sometimes it's being empathetic. Sometimes it's being a good listener, right? Like, you often don't equate that with a superpower, but a lot of other people see that maybe as your greatest strength, right? I think also when we look at this, there's actually a podcast I was listening to on the way in, and they were talking about, it was Leanne Rimes. She had a podcast. Yes. So she was interviewing some performance coach, and they were talking about, with Leanne, how she has a hard time turning it off, right? Being Leanne versus Leanne Rimes.
Okay.
Yep. And so I think people can really relate to that too, because sometimes it's hard to turn off, mom mode, or like you never get to escape a lot of the times.
That's interesting.
Or, if you're in like build mode at work, it's hard to come home and turn that off, right? And put on the different hats. Or take off all the hats and just focus on yourself.
Exactly.
The other thing, though, that was really cool this weekend was, like, they talked about, right, like, superheroes are normally kind of two different people, right? You've got, like, Superman was Clark Kent, and Superman, like, Bruce Banner and the Hulk.
That's right.
Right? And so I think the other amazing part of this is, like, you don't always have to be in your superpower. Right. Like,
Peter Parker.
That's right.
You don't have to be in Spidey mode.
Yes.
All the time. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that analogy.
So maybe what comes naturally to you, but is maybe not something that you're doing all the time. Right?
Right. Well, if you're any type of integrated human being, you definitely need that rest, recoup, recover process, time, or even just time to think about, what happened while you were using your superpower.
Yes. Yeah. So again, question number 1 was what comes naturally to you. A lot of times we don't recognize it, or we take it for granted because it's something that comes so naturally to us.
And I experienced that last thing about, we think that everyone else has them too. It's kind of like that thought process of you give love the way that you receive it, because you're in your own body and you're in your own heart and mind space, that we take it for granted because we, in our space, think that everybody else does that way too, because that's the way that we do it.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. That's interesting. So number 2 is, what fills you with passion? This is a tough one because it's focused on you, right? It's not what do your parents want your superpower to be, or what do you think your superpower should be, or what's the story you've created, I have to be this person.
That's right.
To be a good parent, to be good at.
That's right.
At whatever your trade is.
That's interesting. They call those unconscious family contracts. We make some unconscious family contracts, unspoken ones even at times, but to actually, again, earn love, because, it's filling our parents with joy that we become a lawyer or a doctor or, those things.
So what fills you, and I think that's where a lot of times sitting down with that and unfortunately for a lot of people it's going to be like doing some deep inflection on like, okay, well, I have been this way because I feel like it's not what I have always wanted. So how do I pivot from that? How do I start to
stop self-abandoning? So there's a bit of self-abandonment in that when we work, most of our lives to fill and fuel other people without recognizing like, wow, I was born with these special superpowers or gifts or I was, that's so interesting. Yeah, but doing the deeper work of really understanding like, what drives me, what makes me happy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Number 3 is what makes time disappear. And this is fun because time's an interesting construct anyways, as far as, we've all got 24 hours in the same period or in a day. And, but what, if you can think back to even as a child, right? Like what would you sit in your room and do? Or where did you just completely lose track of time at? I think that can speak a lot to, probably a lot of the skills that you have now, a lot of the, like for me, when I look back at when I was a kid and I would be hours in my room, it's so strange what I would do. I would like take all my little Matchbox cars and just like line them up, like around the whole room, like end to end, line them up. Or put them in colors, or put them like, I was very like, it was just organizational, and it was just like, and then we would, I would like do this whole like the train thing, but it wasn't like, it's just fascinating, like what I would spend time doing, right?
Yes.
So, I look back and it's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense with like my personality, and I see my daughter do a lot of the same things, not with cars, but she's got to have a checklist for her dolls to, get ready for vacation,
That's so great.
So, and she'll spend hours in her room doing this stuff. So, it doesn't have to be what makes time disappear for you right now, because most of us have lost track of that. So, when you look back as a child, when would you get lost in time? Number 4 is what makes you different or weird, right? I've seen shirts like, or you've seen like little bumper stickers, or, like I'm weird. Like all of us are a little weird. Or my favorite is, I think Asheville, because Asheville, North Carolina is kind of weird, but you'll see shirts like keep Asheville weird.
Right, yes.
So it's, when you think of like, my friends think I'm weird because I do this. That oftentimes is your superpower. And even if they think you're a little weird, they probably really think that's cool about you as well. So, number 5.
Oh, wow.
Is what do your friends ask for advice about? So, I think this is always amazing because, but people come in and they instantly like just start telling their life story with you. Right?
Yes.
And so oftentimes your nutritional sessions are actually turned into other types of sessions.
That's right.
Digging through life, digging through all kinds of different topics. But that also says a lot about.
Yes, and it's funny, I think that they come in and honestly it takes on a whole life coaching approach. They just don't know it yet. Yeah.
But it just also goes to show how much this sort of thing affects other areas of your life, right? Because they're coming to you for typically a health problem, but sometimes health problems are actually life problems disguised as a health problem.
100%. We call it a state of dis-ease. It's any time where, energy or emotions, they've been neglected, oppressed, or stuffed down, or they just have been unattended. And what happens is that comes out sideways. And once it comes out sideways and it needs a little bit of time and attention and love and nurturing, it can find its way free.
It's cool to, I guess, recognize that, because again, oftentimes I think that's been more apparent the last couple of years.
Yes.
How much stress and our outside environment has began to affect us on the inside environment.
That's right.
Number 6 is, what did you love to do as a child? So it kind of goes back to, when did you lose track of time? But again, 42% of kids are, they say shamed away. Maybe shamed, maybe is the right word.
It is the right way. It is the right word too. Actually, I was just reading about this, so it's so funny, but a lot of children are deterred or, right, and yeah, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, that type of thing. Yeah. Even emotions. That's so funny that even emotions.
Hugely.
Right?
Yep. I just picked up, emotional coach parenting. I've got a 10 and a 13-year-old. My 13-year-old is throwing me for a loop right now. What's ironic about it is he was just with my mom all weekend, and she said, he's just like you were when you were 13. So I'm like, I know, that's why I'm trying to help him here.
That's right. I think some of the best ways to do that too, I don't mean to sidetrack, but understanding, and you've heard me say over and over again, it all belongs. Everything you are feeling right now, it belongs, and I'm not going anywhere, and you don't have to be alone. You can feel this all the way through. You know what? Anger has its place. The frustration has its place. The sadness has its place. The highs, they have their place, but I'm not going anywhere. And my value, your value, it is not going to change because you're feeling what you're feeling right now. And, my love of you is not going to change. Nothing's going to change due to what you're feeling right now. But as long as we can do this together and you feel like that emotion can be held, that's where it's at.
Yeah. And I think parents, some parents now, we're starting to talk about these things. And so we're trying to, in our own way, right? Focus on allowing our kids to be able to, recognize what their superpowers are.
Yes.
And understanding one kid is completely separate than another kid's.
Yes.
And oftentimes I think we're also, because we look at this in a school setting as well, right? How do you
Societal.
learn? How do you learn? What's your, kind of your superpower that way? So it's I'm really hyper-focused right now on, okay, they have superpowers. That doesn't mean that they have to necessarily conform. They have to follow the rules, but it doesn't have to fit into expectations from everyone else.
And I can tell you, right? And I can tell you because I've got 2 creatives on my hand, and creative expression, we're all about it. It also, I can share a little bit, goes back to my childhood when you were asking me what I was doing. Well, there were clothes everywhere, all over. I would costume piece things together. I don't know, I'd be giving concerts and talks and all sorts of things, and it was a lot of fun. But I look at my kids the same way. My daughter is exactly exactly the same way as I am, but I kind of love looking in to the window of their little, souls and spirits and watching like what they are becoming, because it definitely ties back, to, Olivia was big into costumes, and lo and behold, lo and behold, she's a party princess.
Yes. Number 7 is, what would you do if money did not matter?
I love this question.
Yes. And it's fitting because you could go play the Powerball and win almost $2 billion today.
Right?
So somebody's about to find out. What would you do if money didn't matter?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this is important because how many people do you see that play Powerball and make a lot of money but still come up feeling empty and unfulfilled?
Oh,
right?
It's an amazing statistic. If you look at lottery winners,
right?
I think it's like 10 years they've lost it all.
Right.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. There's a reason for
There is a reason
Yeah.
for it, and it's because they haven't tapped into their superpower,
That's
their
right.
essence.
Right.
What they really want to do with life. So hopefully whoever wins this does do that, because that's a lot of money to lose. Or if they're worried about it, they can give it to me and I will happily figure out how to help them not lose it. Number 8 is, which answer comes up the most? So I guess as you look back at these answers, or as you're thinking about these questions, if there's always the same sort of topic or the same answer that's constantly pulling up with all of these questions, that's your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. Again, because most of the times it's something that you're just taking for granted, and you just have to start maybe nurturing a little bit more. The next one is, how do you boost your superpowers? So I love this because, again, oftentimes this is something pretty new to people, or they think, well, I just have this position in my office. Even if I know what my superpower is, like, it's not gonna really make a difference or help, or like, it's not a huge deal. Like, who am I?
That's funny. That keeps a lot of people held back.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've been in that position
For sure.
of just kind of really just holding back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some things people can do to break free from that? Number 1 is find it, for some people it's find a coach, find
Yes.
a mentor.
That's right.
Find somebody who's, who you gravitate towards, who you feel like is taking the same type of superpower you have and doing something that you think is amazing with it.
Yes.
Go talk to them. How
Yes.
did you do this? So
How do you take that risk and to show up as your most authentic self? And that's always the right answer, but learning agency and learning, authority, learning, how do you, like you said, the word essence, right? It was meant to be, you have an essence because it was actually meant to be put out there in the world.
Right, yeah. And it doesn't have to be, I've got 6 million followers on
No.
Instagram.
Most of the time it's very quiet, by the way. This is a very quiet, just way of being.
Helping out in the church,
Yes.
bringing that superpower, right? Like, or at the school, or with your kids, or
exactly.
with someone else's kids.
In something that's really important to you, actually, too, like charity work, something that's close to your heart. We've talked about Turning Point here, and that's definitely something very close to my heart. So yeah.
So, but don't be afraid to boost that, right? Like, once you start, and really it comes down to, the number 10 is, how do you become a superhero? It's the first step, right? Like, number 1 is,
I don't want to be like, here I come to save the day.
Exactly. So it's that first step. It's just, number 1, recognizing or taking the time to figure out what it is, but then don't just figure it out and sit on it, right? Figure it out and take the next step. What's one thing that I can do today to magnify that superpower, or to show that superpower, or just sit with it and feel that, because a lot of times you haven't allowed yourself to even recognize it or like own that for years. But if you're struggling with, you know, with these questions, my first recommendation would be to, you know, take a couple friends and say, hey, this guy said this weird challenge on a podcast I was listening to, like, what's my superpower, right? Put it out on Facebook.
Yeah.
You're going to be amazed at if you have the audacity to put out there, hey guys, I'm trying to learn a little bit more about myself. What would you say my superpower is? You're going to get some amazing answers.
Yes.
You might also get, like, I don't know, something about your cooking or you know,
Right.
something like that, but maybe that's a superpower. You might get some funny ones too, but
Right?
no one's gonna, first of all, it's not gonna be an empty, no one's not gonna answer.
Right.
Right? And number two, you're gonna be surprised at the answers.
Yes.
And number three, it's gonna be, you know, people are going to see that and say, wow, good for them for taking the time to even ask these questions about themselves.
Yeah. I want to ask our listeners, I say, hey, drop us a line.
That's right.
Right? Hey, give us some insight into what you're thinking. What do you think our superpowers are?
If you've interacted with us, what are our superpowers? We would love to know that. So that's our challenge. Find your superpower, magnify it. If you have a superpower that'll help our superpowers, reach out with that as well. But yeah, again, that's pretty cool. That's a good question. What's our superpowers? Maybe we'll post that online today and see what kind of response we get back as well. So that's all for this week. Thanks everyone. We can't wait to touch base next week. Have an amazing